The meeting took place in a corner booth at the Sands Hotel coffee shop on March 3, 1966. Dean Martin sat across from Carl Rosselli, owner of the Golden Peacock Casino, one of the smaller but profitable establishments on the Las Vegas Strip. Between them on the table was a contract, a standard performance agreement that Dean had fulfilled 3 months earlier. "So about the 50,000, Dean said, his voice calm and conversational. Carl leaned back, lit a cigarette, and smiled. Not a friendly smile. A smile that said he knew something Dean didn't. "Yeah, about that. I've been looking at the numbers, Dean. Your shows didn't pull the kind of revenue we expected. High rollers didn't show up like they usually do for Sinatra or Sammy, so I'm thinking maybe we overpaid." Dean's expression didn't change. "The contract says 50,000 for 6 shows. I did 6 shows, sold out every night. That's the deal. Contracts are flexible, Dean, especially in this town. You know how it works." Carl tapped ash into the tray. "I'm willing to pay you 25. That's more than fair considering the actual revenue. The contract says 50. The contract says a lot of things, but you and I both know that pushing this would be unpleasant for both of us. You don't want problems with casino owners. Bad for business, bad for your career, bad for your friends who also work in Vegas." There it was, the threat, not explicit, but clear enough. Carl was connected, not to the top-tier mob families that ran the Sands or the Desert Inn, but to people who could make life difficult. He was betting that Dean would rather take the loss than risk the complications. Dean looked at Carl for a long moment. Then he stood up, buttoned his jacket, and said something that would echo through Las Vegas for the next year. "You're right, Carl. Pushing this would be unpleasant, so I won't push it. You keep your 50,000. Consider it a gift." Carl looked surprised. He'd expected more fight. "That's very reasonable of you, Dean." "Yeah, very reasonable." Dean's voice was flat, emotionless. "Have a good day, Carl." Dean walked out of the coffee shop, got into his car, and drove home. He didn't call his lawyer. He didn't call his manager. He didn't call anyone. For 3 days, he did nothing. On the 4th day, Dean made a phone call. Not to Carl, not to anyone connected to the Golden Peacock. Just a simple call to his booking agent. "Remove the Golden Peacock from my available venues list. Any particular reason? Personal preference." That was it. No explanation, no drama, just a quiet removal from a list. The following week, Dean had lunch with Frank Sinatra at Chasen's in Los Angeles. They talked about music, movies, Frank's latest romantic drama, Dean's kids, casual conversation. At the end of lunch, almost as an afterthought, Dean mentioned, "By the way, Frank, if Carl Rosselli from the Golden Peacock calls looking to book you, you might want to pass." Frank raised an eyebrow. "Carl give you trouble?" "Let's just say he's not someone I'd recommend doing business with." "Say no more." Frank nodded. "I'll spread the word to Sammy and the others." That was the entire conversation. No details, no anger, no plan, just a quiet recommendation among friends. 3 weeks later, Carl Rosselli called Dean's agent, trying to book him for the Golden Peacock's anniversary celebration. Big event, high profile. Carl was willing to pay 75,000 more than the original contract. Dean's agent called Dean. "Carl Rosselli is offering 75 for the anniversary show. Wants to make peace, I think. Should I counter at 100? Tell him I'm not available." "For 75,000. Dean, that's... Tell him I'm not available. Now or ever. The Golden Peacock is not a venue I work at." The agent paused. "You want me to tell him why?" "No, just that I'm not available." The message was delivered. Carl was confused but not concerned. He'd booked someone else. Vegas was full of talent. He called Frank Sinatra's people. Frank was unavailable. He called Sammy Davis Jr.'s people. Sammy was booked solid. He called Joey Bishop. Not interested. He called Peter Lawford. Have to pass. Carl was starting to understand. The Rat Pack, the biggest draws in Las Vegas, had all suddenly become unavailable for the Golden Peacock, and they'd done it without explanation, without drama, without even acknowledging there was a problem. Carl called Dean directly. Dean's assistant answered, "Mr. Martin isn't taking calls from the Golden Peacock. This is Carl Rosselli, personally. I need to speak with Dean. As Mr. Martin isn't taking calls from the Golden Peacock or its ownership about what happened, I'd like to make it right. I'll pass along your message." The assistant hung up. Carl waited 2 days. No call back. By May 1966, the Golden Peacock was feeling the impact. Without Rat Pack performers, they couldn't compete with the Sands, the Desert Inn, the Flamingo casinos that had the biggest names in entertainment. High rollers went where the entertainment was. Entertainment created atmosphere. Atmosphere created gambling. Gambling created profit. The Golden Peacock's May revenues were down 18% compared to the previous year. Carl told himself it was temporary. A bad month. It happened. June was down 23%. July was down 31%. By August, Carl was desperate. He reached out through intermediaries, connected guys who knew Dean, who could broker a peace. The message came back through channels. Dean says there's nothing to discuss. He doesn't work at the Golden Peacock. That's his choice. Carl should respect it. Carl tried another angle. He reached out to Joey Bishop's manager with an offer, $100,000 for a 2-week engagement. Unheard of money for Joey at that time. Joey's manager called Joey, excited about the offer. Joey said, "I don't work at the Golden Peacock." "Joey, it's $100,000 for 2 weeks. I don't work at the Golden Peacock." "Can you tell me why?" "Because Dean doesn't work there. And if Dean doesn't work somewhere, I don't work there." "Call Sammy, ask him." Same answer. The manager called back to Carl with a polite decline. No explanation. Carl was beginning to realize what was happening. Dean hadn't sued him. Dean hadn't threatened him. Dean hadn't even badmouthed him publicly. Dean had simply stopped working at his casino, and Dean's friends quietly, without announcement, without drama, had done the same. It was the most devastating retaliation Carl had ever experienced because there was nothing to fight against. No lawsuit to defend, no public accusation to deny, no mob beef to settle, just absence. The absence of the performers who could pack his showroom and bring in the high rollers. September 1966, the Golden Peacock's revenues were down 42% year over year. Carl's investors were asking questions. His casino manager was recommending cost cuts. His marketing director was suggesting they book cheaper, lesser-known acts to fill the showroom. Carl tried one more time. He went to the Sands Hotel himself, found out when Dean was performing, bought a front-row table, and after the show he waited by Dean's dressing room. Dean's assistant saw him first. "Mr. Rosselli, Mr. Martin isn't—" "I know, not taking calls, not available, not interested. I get it, but I'm here, in person. I need 5 minutes." The assistant disappeared into the dressing room. 2 minutes later, he emerged. "Mr. Martin will see you." 5 minutes. Carl walked into the dressing room. Dean was taking off his bow tie, his back to the door. "Carl." "Dean. Thanks for seeing me." 5 minutes. Dean turned around, his face neutral, unreadable. "I made a mistake. With the 50,000. I was wrong. I want to pay you what I owe you, the full 50 plus interest, whatever you think is fair." Dean nodded slowly. "Okay." Carl felt relief wash over him. "Okay, so you can send a check to my business manager. He'll confirm receipt. And then, we're good? You'll consider performing at the Golden Peacock again." Dean looked at Carl for a long moment. "Carl, you threatened my career. You said pushing for what I was owed would be unpleasant for me. You implied you could make trouble for me and my friends. Do you remember saying that?" I was trying to negotiate. It's how business works in Vegas." "No, it's how you think business works. But here's what actually happened. You refused to pay me what you owed me, thinking I was powerless. You thought I needed you more than you needed me. You were wrong." Dean sat down, lit a cigarette. "I don't work at the Golden Peacock because I don't want to work at the Golden Peacock. Not because of the money, not because of some grudge, but because you showed me who you are, and I chose not to do business with you anymore. That's my right. And your friends, the Rat Pack? I didn't ask them to do anything. I mentioned to Frank that I didn't recommend working with you. He made his own choice. He told Sammy. Sammy made his own choice. That's how friendship works. We look out for each other." Carl felt his last hope slipping away. "Dean, my casino is dying. Without top-tier entertainment, I can't compete. I'll lose everything. That's unfortunate. Come on, Dean. I'm apologizing. I'm paying you back with interest. What more do you want? Dean stood up, walked over to Carl, and spoke quietly, calmly. Carl, I don't want anything from you. I don't want revenge. I don't want to destroy you. I don't even want an apology, really. What I want is to never think about you again. And the only way to do that is to never work with you again. So that's it. My business fails because I made one mistake. Your business fails because you tried to cheat someone who had more power than you realized. Not physical power, not mob power, just the power of being someone people want to work with. You gambled that I needed you. You lost. That's not my fault. Carl's voice rose, desperate now. I'll pay you double, triple. Name your price. There is no price. This isn't about money. It's about trust. And I don't trust you. Dean opened the door to his dressing room. Your 5 minutes are up. Carl left. He sent the check, 50,000 plus 10,000 interest. Dean's business manager confirmed receipt. Dean never acknowledged it beyond that. By November 1966, the Golden Peacock was in serious financial trouble. Revenues were down 58%. The casino was hemorrhaging money. Carl's investors forced him into selling his majority stake at a massive loss. The new owners rebranded the casino, fired Carl, and immediately reached out to Dean's agent. Could Dean be persuaded to perform at the newly managed venue? Dean's agent called him. The Golden Peacock has new ownership. They're asking if you'd consider performing there now. They're offering, who are the new owners? The agent provided names. Dean recognized one of them, a legitimate businessman with no connection to Carl. What are they offering? 60,000 for 6 shows. Dean thought about it. Tell them 75 and I'll consider it. The venue has a reputation problem now. They need to pay for that. The new owners agreed. Dean performed there in February 1967, sold out every show. The newly rebranded casino began recovering. Carl Rosselli, meanwhile, left Las Vegas. His reputation was destroyed, not because Dean had badmouthed him, but because everyone in the industry knew that Dean Martin and the Rat Pack refused to work with him. In Vegas, that was a death sentence. No credibility, no access to top talent, no future. The story of what Dean had done spread through Las Vegas quietly, in whispered conversations in dressing rooms and backstage at shows. Not as gossip, but as a lesson. You hear what happened to Carl Rosselli? Yeah, tried to stiff Dean Martin. Dean destroy him. Nicone. Dean just stopped working there. But that was enough. The lesson was clear. You could have mob connections, casino ownership, money, power, but if the talent didn't want to work with you, you had nothing. And Dean Martin had demonstrated that the power of absence, of simply choosing not to be present, could be more devastating than any confrontation. In 1972, Dean was doing an interview for a business magazine about power dynamics in entertainment. The interviewer asked about negotiation tactics, about how performers protected themselves from being taken advantage of. I heard a story, the interviewer said, about a casino owner who tried to cheat you out of money, and you supposedly destroyed his business without ever suing him or fighting him. Is that true? Dean smiled slightly. I don't like to talk about specific situations, but I will say this. The most powerful thing you can sometimes do is nothing. Not nothing as in accepting being cheated, but nothing as in simply choosing not to participate anymore. Can you elaborate? Look, in Vegas in the 60s, there were a lot of powerful people, mob guys, casino owners, people who thought they ran everything. And in a lot of ways they did. But they didn't run talent. Talent ran itself. If you're a performer, your power is your performance. If you choose not to perform somewhere, that place suffers. It's simple economics. But walking away from a venue, refusing to work somewhere that costs you too, doesn't it? Maybe in the short term. But there are plenty of venues, plenty of places that want you, that treat you fairly, that honor their agreements. Why waste time with someone who doesn't? Some people might call that vindictive. Dean shook his head. It's not vindictive, it's just self-respect. If someone lies to you, cheats you, threatens you, why would you continue doing business with them? You wouldn't. You'd just move on. That's all I did. I moved on. And your friends followed your lead. My friends made their own decisions. I told Frank what happened. Frank decided he didn't want to work there either. Not because I asked him to boycott the place, but because Frank values loyalty and doesn't like people who cheat his friends. Same with Sammy, Joey, Peter. They weren't following orders. They were making choices based on their own values, and the casino owner's business collapsed. I heard that happened. I also heard he eventually lost the casino, left Vegas. I don't take pleasure in that. I don't think about it. I just know that I made a choice to protect myself and my career, and it turned out that choice had consequences for him. That's not revenge. That's just cause and effect. The interviewer pressed, "But you must have known that refusing to work there would hurt his business. You must have known your friends would follow suit." Dean paused, considering his answer carefully. "Here's what I knew. I knew I wasn't going to work somewhere that I didn't feel respected. That was my only thought. If that decision hurt his business, that's because his business model depended on having performers who wanted to be there. When he lost that, he lost everything. But that's not my responsibility. That's his responsibility for creating a situation where people didn't want to work with him." The interview was published in Fortune magazine under the title "The Power of Absence: How Dean Martin Redefined Leverage in Entertainment." It became required reading in some business schools as an example of non-confrontational power dynamics. Years later, in 1985, a young comedian approached Dean at an industry event. "Mr. Martin, can I ask you something? I'm dealing with a club owner who's trying to cheat me out of my pay. Everyone says to just suck it up, that fighting him will blacklist me. What should I do?" Dean looked at the kid. Couldn't have been more than 25, nervous, broke, desperate for advice. "What's your name?" "Jerry Kellerman." "Jerry, let me ask you something. How much does he owe you?" $500. "I know it's not much compared to—" $500 is $500. It's your money. You earned it." Dean sipped his drink. "Here's what you do. Tell him you want your money. If he refuses, don't argue. Don't threaten. Just tell him calmly that you won't work for him anymore. But Mr. Martin, he's one of the only club owners in the area. If I don't work for him, then you work somewhere else. Move to a different city if you have to. Work smaller venues. Build your reputation. But don't work for someone who steals from you. Because here's what happens if you do. You teach him that he can steal from you. You teach yourself that your work has no value. You teach the industry that you're someone who can be cheated. But what if I need the work? What if I can't afford to walk away?" Dean looked at Jerry seriously. "Then you can't afford to stay, because working for someone who doesn't pay you isn't work. It's slavery. You're performing for free. At least if you walk away, you're free to find someone who will actually pay you." And Uncle Jerry nodded slowly. "Did you ever have to walk away from work you needed?" "Many times. Early in my career, before I was famous, I walked away from clubs that tried to cheat me. Sometimes I didn't work for weeks because of it. Ate cheap, slept in my car, but I never regretted it, because every time I walked away from a bad situation, I made room for a good situation to find me. And if walking away means I never work in this town again..." Dean smiled. "Jerry, there's always another town, there's always another venue, but there's only one you. And if you don't respect yourself, nobody else will either." Jerry took the advice. He walked away from the club owner who owed him money. He struggled for a while, but 2 years later, he was working regularly in better venues, building a reputation as someone with integrity. He never forgot the conversation. When Dean Martin died in 1995, Jerry Kellerman, by then a successful comedian with his own TV special, told the story publicly in a tribute. "Dean Martin taught me that power isn't about fighting, it's about choosing. He chose not to work with people who didn't respect him. And that choice, that quiet refusal, was more powerful than any lawsuit, any public fight, any dramatic confrontation. He taught me that sometimes the most devastating thing you can do to someone who wrongs you is simply refuse to be there anymore." The story of Carl Rosselli became legend in entertainment circles. Not because Dean had destroyed him. Dean had just walked away. But Carl's business had been so dependent on the talent, so reliant on having the biggest names, that when those names chose not to be there, everything collapsed. It was a lesson in leverage, in power dynamics, in the difference between visible power, mob connections, money, ownership, and invisible power being someone people actually want to work with. Carl Rosselli had all the visible power. Dean Martin had the invisible power, and when they clashed, invisible power won, not through confrontation, but through absence. That's the real story of the $50,000 Dean Martin was cheated out of. Not that he got revenge, not that he destroyed someone, but that he made a simple choice to walk away, and that choice revealed who had real power all along. It wasn't the casino owner with mob connections. It wasn't the businessman with money. It was the performer who could walk into any venue in America and pack the room. The performer whose friends trusted his judgment enough to follow his lead without being asked. The performer who understood that saying no was sometimes more powerful than any threat. Dean never got revenge on Carl Rosselli. He just stopped being available. And sometimes absence is the most devastating response of all. The $50,000? Dean eventually donated it to charity when Carl paid it back. He didn't need the money. The money was never the point. The point was respect. The point was boundaries. The point was demonstrating that you don't fight people who wrong you. You just stop letting them benefit from your presence. Carl Rosselli learned that lesson too late. By the time he understood what had happened, the damage was irreversible. Not because Dean had attacked him, but because Dean had simply walked away. And in Vegas, in entertainment, in any business built on relationships and talent, walking away can be the most powerful move you make. Dean Martin knew that, and on March 3, 1966, sitting in that coffee shop at the Sands Hotel, when Carl Rosselli thought he'd won by keeping $50,000, Dean had already decided on the move that would checkmate him completely. He'd simply never play the game with Carl again.